The Seven Ages of Man, represented by a tiny wee baby with a midwife from Warwick Hospital, a schoolboy from Shakespeare's own school, a student from Wolverhampton, a soldier serving in the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, a member of Her Majesty's Council, and a retired Royal Shakespeare Company production manager. And now for the first of 4 short films about the life of William Shakespeare, introduced by a man who knows all about the Bard, having played him on screen in Shakespeare in Love. It is, of course, the lovely Joseph Fiennes, to introduce the seasons of Shakespeare's life, starting with spring.
William Shakespeare.
Well, looking at what their bodies are capable of doing, I find that difficult to believe we're the same species. The balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet, of course, performed by Mariah Gale and Natey Jones.
And the Royal Ballet's Yasmin Nagdi and Matthew Ball performing the same scene in Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet with Kenneth Macmillan's famous choreography.
The Royal Ballet commissioned the piece in 1964 for the tercentenary of Shakespeare's birth, where it was danced by Rudolf Nureyev and Margot Fonteyn. Horrible History's gang there with a playful take on the past.
And now Shakespeare's own take on a bit of history, the history of King Henry V. Here the young king, having conquered France at the Battle of Agincourt, finds himself powerless and tongue-tied in his attempts to woo the French Princess Catherine, with whom he hopes to unite the English and French thrones. So, Catherine,
Yes.
If Shakespeare were alive today, what would he be?
He would be 452.
No, obviously that's not quite what I meant. He was at the forefront of popular culture, so today he would be, what? He'd be writing films, he'd be writing TV shows. Who are today's linguistic geniuses?
Well, I will tell you.
Tell me.
And who, well, in my opinion,
Yeah.
who better to answer than hip-hop Shakespeare with a Calla and Nitin Sawhney?
Very good.
Yeah.
As spring turns to summer, love can turn to madness.
And love certainly does mad things to people in these 3 scenes from As You Like It, Twelfth Night, and A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Rosalind, dressed as a boy, woos her beloved Orlando, who somehow fails to recognise her.
The steward Malvolio, who lusts after his mistress Olivia, has been tricked into dressing up to impress her.
And Titania, the queen of the fairies, finds herself enchanted by a poor old weaver called Bottom, who's been transformed into a donkey. When the French composer Berlioz first saw Shakespeare performed in Paris in 1827, he said it struck him like a thunderbolt. He became obsessed with Shakespeare, writing a Romeo and Juliet symphony, an overture for King Lear, and at the end of his life, an opera called Beatrice and Benedict, based on Much Ado About Nothing. And now, here's a duet from that opera. The night before her wedding, with her maid Ursula, the bride-to-be Hero contemplates her marriage to her beloved Claudio. Simon Russell Beale with John of Gaunt's famous Celebration of England from Richard II, a piece that has appeared in poetry anthologies since the play was first published in 1597.
It's 1956. Jazz giant Duke Ellington is in Stratford, Ontario, playing a few gigs with his band.
And there's a Shakespeare festival on, and Duke Ellington takes a break from his music to go and see the show. The Duke sneaks in at the back and sits in the aisle to watch.
So moved is he that he comes back the next night and the next, soaking it all up until eventually he is inspired to write his very own homage to Shakespeare.
Here is the Midland Youth Jazz Orchestra to play the opening of Duke Ellington's Such Sweet Thunder. Shakespeare is performed all over the world.
He is translated into every language, from Albanian to Zulu.
Here are scenes from 2 landmark productions that opened our eyes to his global influence.
South African writer and director Welcome Msomi brought his company to Britain in 1972 with his Zulu Macbeth, Umabetu.
while the Japanese director Yukio Ninagawa brought his famous Cherry Blossom Macbeth to the Edinburgh Festival in 1985. Amazing, amazing. Rufus Wainwright singing his own version of one of Shakespeare's sonnets.
Shakespeare was about to enter his 40th year when Queen Elizabeth I died in 1603.
When James VI of Scotland became the new King James I, Shakespeare's company was promoted and became the King's Men. But this was a troubled period. A terrorist attack, the Gunpowder Plot, nearly succeeded in blowing up the royal family and Parliament in 1605. The world seemed to have lost its moorings. It seemed to be adrift in a sea of uncertainty. And this prevailing sense of doom and futility is present in many of the tragedies Shakespeare wrote at this time.
These next three scenes all take place in this darkness. In King Lear, we meet an old man who has resigned his crown and been thrown out into the storm. In Antony and Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt prepares to confound her enemies and end her life. But first, in Macbeth, we encounter a couple who have just committed murder.
Shakespeare's tragedies, haunted by death, may plumb the depths of the human experience. But there is one character in the canon of all his work which, perhaps more than any other, celebrates life. One incredible comic creation we could not leave out tonight.
The irrepressible Sir John Falstaff, a rogue, a thief, and a close companion of the dissolute playboy Prince Hal. From Henry IV, Part 1, here is the tavern scene, where Falstaff pretends to be the king and gives the prince some fatherly advice.